On June 24, 2022, the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in the case of Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization. This decision ended an almost 50-year federal right to abortion and returned the authority to regulate abortion to individual states. Almost immediately, states across the nation put strict regulations on abortions, nearly all of them impossible to work inside of. Several states have banned abortion past 6 weeks, which many people have said is far too early for a woman to spot a pregnancy. States like Alabama, Arkansas, Idaho, and a handful of other states have outright banned abortion. This decision made by the Supreme Court, and so by state governments, is a direct violation of human rights and bodily autonomy. For starters, states that have outright banned abortion have failed to consider victims of rape or incest. They've created an environment where it is socially acceptable to force a woman to carry her assaulter's baby to term. On top of this, states that have strict abortion laws, but allow exceptions, often use vague terms that cause confusion as to whether an abortion can be done. This confusion doesn't stop at pregnancies, though. Ever since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, there have been several cases of women experiencing ectopic pregnancies who were not given proper treatment because hospitals are unsure whether they can intervene. An ectopic pregnancy is when a fertilized egg implants outside of the uterus. This typically occurs in the fallopian tube, and it is very dangerous. Seeing as the egg is fertilized, it will continue to grow, but because the egg is not where it belongs, it can cause rupture and internal bleeding. However, it is important to explain that while the egg can develop, it will not survive. An embryo is meant to grow and survive within the uterus. Therefore, letting an ectopic pregnancy go untreated is both harmful to the mother and the baby. Yet, there are hardly any concrete regulations on how to treat an ectopic pregnancy. According to Guttmacher's article titled "Focusing on Exceptions Misses the True Harm of Abortions," written by Elizabeth Nash, every abortion ban currently being enforced has an exception for the life of the pregnant person, and some have exceptions in cases of severe health conditions. However, providers across the country have warned that these exceptions use vague, non-medical language, which is extremely difficult to follow and apply. Combined with the substantial legal risk to providers from misinterpreting a legal exception, including large fines, imprisonment, and loss of a license, this means important health decisions are being made by lawyers, not medical professionals. As a result, pregnant people suffer because their medical condition must deteriorate to the point at which the exception is met, and the provider can avoid criminal liability. The article also mentions how there are very few exceptions for rape and incest, as previously mentioned. Lawmakers that have created these bans and regulations claim that they are saving lives, completely ignoring the fact that they are risking the lives of thousands of women and fetuses. Their righteous annihilation of women's rights is supposed to be backed up by the idea that life begins at conception and that an abortion is equivalent to murder, but they then turn around and make it damn near impossible to access contraceptives. While contraceptives like birth control have not been outright banned in states yet, several have made it very hard to acquire them. States like Texas, Alabama, and Florida have done this by cutting funding for places like Planned Parenthood that help give women access to contraceptives, as well as creating questionable regulations for contraceptives. As previously mentioned, Texas is a state that is and has gone for contraceptives. The right to contraception, state and federal action, misinformation, and the courts, written by Mabel Felix, Lori Sobel, and Alina Salganikoff, says, in 2020. Texas received permission from the Trump administration to exclude emergency contraceptives from its Medicaid-funded family planning program after requesting to exclude coverage in 2017. This waiver will remain in effect until December 2024. We circle back to the main point, which is that the overturning of Roe v. Wade is killing women. We touched on how ectopic pregnancies are being affected, but it's important to acknowledge that sometimes a regular pregnancy can still be dangerous. There can always be complications, or the mother could have some kind of disease that makes pregnancy dangerous. It is impossible to plan for so many different scenarios. There are two statistics from an article from the Gender Equity Policy Institute, the GEPI for short, titled Maternal Mortality in the United States After Abortion Bans. The first statistic covers how women in states with strict abortion bans are directly affected. Women who lived in states that ban abortion were significantly more likely to die during pregnancy, while giving birth, or soon after the birth of their child, compared to those who lived in states where abortion care was legal and accessible, our analysis shows. A mother's risk of dying was nearly twice as high in the banned states. In some states, the risk was even higher. Mothers in Louisiana, for example, were 3 times as likely as mothers in supportive states to die during pregnancy, childbirth, or soon after giving birth. And the second statistic takes us back to a state you've surely become familiar with and how the people running it are risking the lives of women all over. Welcome back, Texas. In the first full year of Texas's state abortion ban, 2022, maternal mortality increased significantly. The maternal mortality rate in Texas rose 56%. Among white mothers, it was up 95%. Over the same time period, maternal mortality overall increased just 11% in the United States. In 2023, Texas's maternal mortality rate was also substantially higher than the rate in the United States. Overall, maternal mortality was up 33% post-ban. Within Texas, Black women were 2.5 times as likely as white women to suffer maternal death in 2023. Mothers in Texas were 1.7 times as likely to suffer maternal mortality as mothers in supportive states. Latina and white mothers in Texas faced double the risk of maternal mortality compared to their counterparts living in supportive states. The cherry on top is that the same lawmakers who have voted to ban abortion and are responsible for the death of mothers across America somehow think they're exempt from the rules they themselves have created. In May of 2024, Florida Congresswoman Kat Cammack went to the emergency room and discovered that she was 5 weeks into an ectopic pregnancy. There was no heartbeat, and it was decided that she was at serious risk. However, doctors hesitated to do the necessary procedures because of Florida's strict abortion ban, a ban that Cammack herself has supported. She was eventually treated, and the embryo was removed. After the incident, Kat Cammack went on to blame the left for the incident, rather than the Republican Party that oversaw the abortion ban and the vague wording that made the doctors fear losing their license. Another thing to remember when it comes to the lawmakers who are behind these bans and intense regulations is that they are not doing this out of the kindness of their heart. They stand in front of crowds and claim they're doing this to save children, but the second those unwanted babies are born, suddenly those lawmakers are cutting funding for education, for food stamps, for healthcare, all the things a child could benefit from growing up with. It's so common for people to say, well, that baby could have found the cure to cancer, but so could the little girl being detained by ICE for having the audacity to just live in America. So could the thousands of children being slaughtered in Gaza with the help from our government. So could the 44% of LGBTQ+ youth in America who consider suicide because of the hate they face. So could the Black men and women being lynched on college campuses with no justice. All of these potential doctors, scientists, lawyers, or whatever they could have wanted to be when they grew up, have just as much of a chance of changing the world as an unborn fetus. But they don't get nearly a fraction of the attention that lawmakers are giving to destroying women's rights. I want to make it clear that any reason for an abortion is a valid reason. While I focused heavily on how women of rape and incest, as well as women whose lives are at risk from pregnancy, are being affected, women who simply do not want to have a child have just as much of a right to abortion. Forcing people into livelihoods that they do not want is not only damaging to that person, but the baby you are forcing them to bring into the world. Resentment can and will build against that child. Finally, I want to remind everyone of Adriana Smith. She was a 31-year-old Georgia nurse and mother, and she was just 8 weeks pregnant when she was declared brain dead due to a car accident. Despite this, Adriana was forced to be kept alive on life support so her unborn fetus could continue to grow. Adriana's family were given no other options or solutions, being told they were legally required to let this happen. A woman who was officially brain dead and, unfortunately, had no chance of survival on her own, was kept as a human incubator for an unborn fetus. A direct violation of her bodily autonomy, but also a dangerous decision for her fetus. Babies in the womb require their mothers to stay healthy, to eat appropriate foods, to get the right amount of exercise and nourishment so that both mother and fetus can stay healthy. Adriana's baby was born on June 13, 2025, via C-section and was immediately taken to the NICU due to breathing complications. As recently as August of 2025, the baby is still struggling to breathe. We are being forced to watch as our government takes advantage of vulnerable women and their families, forcing them into situations they may or may not have wanted, endangering the very children they claim to be saving. Pro-lifers often claim that we're being dramatic and paranoid when we say that our government is going to take away all our rights, but that is because they're blind to what is directly in front of them, and that is that our government does not care about us. An American lawmaker cares about you as little as they care about me, as little as they care about Hispanic people being brutalized by ICE, as little as they care about transgender people being driven to suicide or self-harm every day, as little as they care about the children being murdered in their classrooms. As long as they have money and power, we do not matter. Our government has not just taken our right to choose, they are actively making decisions on what our bodies should be used for. That is not an America I want to live in, and neither should you.